The next one is called human resource management, because can't I then come along and add another column on here and put the actual human resources and actually start putting names on here? Like I might have Todd and Sam. Now, whenever you put your names on here, isn't it then telling them what they're doing, when they're doing it, and when they have to have it finished by? Here's the thing, however. If you've got more than one name, the magic comes from putting a little R next to one of their names. What do you think R stands for? Excellent. Because the project manager is responsible for the whole project, but they're not necessarily doing the task. A person can come along and be responsible for each task. And the critical thing from a psychology point is we have to tell them who's responsible. Because otherwise you have this scenario. I thought you were doing it. No, I thought you had it under control. I'm sure you did it last week. And guess what? It hasn't been done. But if one's responsible, guess what? They often check that it has been done. So the trick and magic in project management in this front is to actually tell each person who's responsible for each task. Because when we come along in the meetings later, you'll realise that when we come to a meeting, we actually say to them, what percentage complete is that task done? And who do you think we ask? Excellent. See, some project managers go, oh no, I know where I've got my finger on the pulse. I know everything. I know exactly where percentage is. And I go, well, you've just lost the magic. Because the magic is, if you then say it was 80%, it was 80% last week, and you go, but you came up with a figure, not me. Whereas if you actually use the responsible officer and they've said 80%, you can keep them accountable for it. So the intent is to always check with the responsible officer what percentage complete. Does that make sense? Because that's important. Because when we do come along to running the project, we're going to have a column here called percentage complete. And that percentage complete is actually going to be able to tell us how well we're going with the project. Because remember, time-wise, if we said that this had to finish by the 14th of July, and at the 14th of July, if it was finished, what percentage would we expect to see? 100%. If it's 80%, guess what? You automatically know where the issues are. So you automatically know where to focus. Would you agree with that? So this is how we keep projects tracked. This is how the project manager can sit back and work out, where do I have to put the effort and resources, because where's the issues? The issues are going to be given away by me tracking where the project's going. So here's a question for you. If you do not have a work breakdown structure, how did you come up with a budget? And the answer is going to be like this. But then it's not in context to anything else, because then we'll say, how did you work out the schedule then? Because if you're not using these tasks and working them out, how did you come up with it? It's going to be another big wag. And then we'll come along and say, well, how the hell do people know what they're doing? Remember, any ambiguity is going to cause an issue. Then you come along and say, well, if you don't have a work breakdown structure, you can't do all those things. How do you know where the project's at? You can't even track the project. So if you can't track the project, do you understand how important this tool? Who thinks this is a pretty important tool? The work breakdown structure is the key tool. Without it, we will argue, how did you come up with the budget? How did you come up with this schedule? How do you know who's working on what? How do they know who's responsible? And how the hell are you tracking this project? So your job as a project manager and a team member is to make sure we're following it. We have it and we're following it. Because as soon as we get to a date and it's not 100%, we automatically know where the issues are. We can focus on the issues. Yes?
Can I just ask, so that you can get software for that?
Yes. Microsoft Project is a Microsoft product which is probably the most known. It's got the most training available. It's got the most books written about it. It's fairly easy, but what I'll try and sneak in to let you see it over the next few days so you can get a bit of a feel for it, because if you set it up right, it can be a little treat. But if you don't do that, for example, and went and tried doing that in say Excel, the catch is you don't lose all these connections. So if you then had to change a date, you're going to have to manually change it. Whereas in these tools, when you write it up, it automatically knows that's dependent. So if you change that date, it automatically changes the other dates. So if you don't use the real tools for the job, it just gets more difficult. People in the room will often be using something called Primavera. Who's got Primavera in their workplace? Because there's a few engineering companies here. Well, Primavera, I'll give you an example of showing you. But to get into Primavera, your company's paying over $500,000 to go into a license there. MS Project, they're still paying over $1,000 per license, but if you're an educational institute, for example, you get this Microsoft Select license. But just know that there's two versions. One version is a desktop, what we call the workstation version, which means it's just a standalone version. The second version is called Microsoft Server, which means multiple people can be going on and using it at the same time. In fact, what it does is it gets the list of everyone's names, keeps them on one sheet, and as you're allocating them to a project, it even tracks how much time they've got left and what projects are they running on. But to have that, you have to have a whole pile of Microsoft infrastructure in it as well. So you can see that there's a couple of catches. There are some free versions out there, but all you do is go on web and go look for, guess what? WBS tools, and you'll come across them. Microsoft Project, by the way, isn't a project management suite of tools. It's really a tool that helps us do this, whereas Primavera catches a whole pile of other things as well. Okay, good question. Now, from the human resources, we also have to know, how do we select people? How do we get them working? How do we make sure they're qualified? All those kind of things. So, each of you have your own flow. And your flow is where you do things with more ease, more faster, more efficiently, and with far more passion and fun. In PeopleRich, we actually use a tool called Extended Disc. And the disc profile is the behavior profile that tells us exactly where your flow is. And if you know your flow, do you think your life can get easier for you? Because when you're in your flow, it's like swimming downstream. But when you turn around in ebb, that's when it's swimming upstream, and it's very, very hard. So when you look at your being in your flow, we're trying to get our team in their flow. Now, let me give you an example. We've got a lot of people in the room here. If I came along and said to you, there's actually always three groups. There's a group that can do it because it's more likely to be in line with their flow. There's one that will kind of take it on or do it all right, or can be developed in it because that's somewhere near their flow. And then there's the other group of people that are just going to do something completely opposite. So it won't be in their flow. Let me give you a practical example. If we're going to run a meeting here and I needed someone to take minutes, where are those beautiful people that would actually take the minutes for me? There'll be a percentage of you here. Who's going to help me? No one over on this table at least. Okay. Right, so we've got a few people, right? So generally, who would actually help take minutes? Just there will be a show of hands, right? Okay, cool. When these people aren't there, I'm starting to look a bit more desperate now. I'm coming along and say, guys, who will help me take the minutes? Who will then volunteer? Okay, yeah, good. Who are the people that won't volunteer no matter what? Okay, couple there. And who won't put up their hand any question I ask them for the next 3 days, just to check where you're at. So when you look at it, you can still see there's a portion of each three. So someone goes to a management course, they learn about, you should be a chairperson. Everyone should be developing in the workplace. They go, cool, so they come and go, well, this month you're going to be chairperson, and then you're going to be chairperson, and you know what, we're all going to have a chance, and at the end, we'll feel all great because professionally developed, we'll all be skilled up as chair people, how great. Guess what? One group of people go, oh, yeah, I've done it before, that's all cool. The other one goes, oh, I want to develop in that area. The other group says, don't want to do that. And guess what happens when it's their turn? Yeah, they're sick or they don't turn up. So here's how it works. We can try and match people to the task based on their flow. Now, this might be worthwhile you writing down here because a lot of project managers struggle on saying, how do I fit people to jobs? Let's just walk through some of the tools. One of the tools, as I mentioned, is behavior profile, because the behavior profile tells us exactly where you flow. In fact, one of the reasons why I'm an international, recognised and profiled in that international best-selling book as a top mentor in the world is because I use these tools to help people get into their flow and become millionaires and multimillionaires. Because if you understand the concept of flow, where you do things easier, faster, and more efficiently, which is totally aligned to your behavior profile, do you think you're going to succeed easier? Absolutely. A lot of people spend their life working in ebb, and they haven't actually worked out where their flow is. So it's a critical thing we do at PeopleRich. But how can I work out how good you are? So if I came in here, I may not have met you before, and I'm trying to work out who I could put on my project team. What are some things I could do? I could do a behavior profile. What else? I could interview you. Excellent. If it's a formal interview, guess what? You might have a bit of a mask there. You might only tell me the things I want to hear. So I then often go back to that, that factual thing we call a CV, resume, just make sure all the facts are right, which, as you know, people colour them these days, don't they? So we can take them as a pinch of salt. What else?
Psychometrics.
Yep, I could start doing some psychometric testing, which is another form of profiling. Yep. Excellent. I could actually get them to do some form of practical test or even a theoretical test to see where their knowledge really is. Good. What about asking people that have worked with you? Would that be a good way of doing it? I could check someone else's view of you. Yeah. I could go back and look at your performance records. That's why we do the performance databases. I could ask you for a skills matrix. So a skills matrix is where we list the skills and we say for you to come along and say what you think you've got: no skill, low skill, medium skill, high skill. Because here's the thing. A lot of times people in your workplace have skills that you wouldn't even realise they had, that they went to university for things completely different. Do you know where I started in university? I started in music. Then I became a world champion, then I gave it away. But before that, I was in music. I'm not really using music a lot these days. Who else in the room has done something that isn't necessarily related to their job? You want to study something or a degree? Can I ask, please?
Started off in forestry.
Okay.
Now in property development, essentially.
Excellent. Started in forestry, in property development. Cool. And engineering, mainstream engineering as well. Good. Yes. Investment banking and now working in the education. Excellent. That's a good example. Who else? I saw a couple of hands.
Naval architect.
Excellent. A naval architect, which is a world behavioural profile expert these days. Good.
I'm a professional snowboarder.
Excellent. Even better. Yeah, and living in Perth. Great place. Professional snowboarder who's now living in Perth. No, that's good. Excellent.
Antique shop retailer.
Excellent. Antique shop retailer, now working as a consultant in the behavioural area. Good. So often we don't get to even hear these things unless we have authentic conversations with people. So here's the trick, and here's a little tip. If I ask you what you do as your hobbies or what you do in your spare time, you often tell me stuff that is aligned to your flow. For example, if I find out that you love to read and write, and I might not see that in the workplace, but then I find out you're a prolific writer and reader, how can I use that skill, excuse me, how can I use that skill in a project team? Fantastic. I can actually, yeah, he's trying to find someone to take minutes now. Good one. So when you look at it, I can use that for report writing, for the communications, for the marketing maybe. What about if someone comes along and says, I love public speaking? Do you think we could use that somehow? What type of role could we use that? Yeah, the publications, the presentations, the communications. So suddenly we can take a person that may not actually be in their full flow, find out what they want, look at the tasks we've got and align them. So I've gone into some cases where the people just don't want to do the jobs that they've been allocated, and you go in there and you say, well, who wants to do what? And then they go, I want to do that. And then next minute the whole thing's working. Because here's where some project managers go wrong. They're in the back office. They're working on their little work breakdown structure, and they come out and say, here's what you're doing, here's when you're doing it, here's what you're responsible for. The rule in this stuff is even if you had to write it on your own, you then come to the team and go, have a look at this, just make sure that you are available, you are capable, and you're comfortable with what we're doing before we approve it. Who thinks that's a better approach? Because that's where we get the buy-in with the people. But if you're matching their skills and their natural talents and their interests to the task, do you think you're going to have a happier team? Because that's one thing that we talked about a lot already this morning, where people were saying they had the wrong people around. And I think came from Ben earlier, and I'd be going back, Ben, and saying, what are those people's skills? Where are their flow? Because guess what? They can do stuff that no one else can do as easy, as more efficiently, and with more passion. But often we've never given them the opportunity, or they haven't worked out how they take that stuff and bring it into their workplace. Because if I know you've got certain skills, I'll then say, how do you think you could change that and bring that value into your workplace? Because if you are doing those things, you're going to have far more fun doing them if you can work out how to bring them into the workplace. Make sense? Any other tips we could do? Anyone use anything else in employing people? Okay. Good. So you can see there's a lot of examples there where we could start matching people better to the task and getting them more involved. The typical thing we find in work breakdown structures is we automatically know that some tasks are going to have to be internal people and some tasks have to be external. So it becomes a no-brainer. For example, what wouldn't you let someone else outside come and do? What kind of criteria would you have to use an internal person for?
Commercial and confidence.
Excellent. Anything that's highly secret, commercial and confidence type of thing where we don't want to disclose it. Anyone think of any other example?
Procedures, policies.
Excellent. Your policies maybe have to be in your frame of mind and understanding your industry, so they might have to be developed inside. Any other example?
Niche skills that aren't core to your business.
Excellent. There could be skills that no one else actually has because that your company develops that particular skill set. So it's very hard to bring anyone else in. So there's going to be some stuff that has to be done internal. There'll also be some stuff that has to be done external. You might not have a lawyer, so you have to go outside. Or an audit. If we're doing our company accounts, they have to be done outside the organisation. So those people have to be outside. So we could automatically say what have to be inside, what has to be outside, and then the ones that are in between, that's when you say who's available and can we plug them in, because if we don't have any of them, then we start looking at contractors and all those things. It's largely around risk, by the way, trying to manage the risk, because you want to have the most efficient people doing the tasks. Okay, any questions about HR? Then it comes into, HR.
Situation where you don't have somebody with the flow that you want to do the job.
Yep.
How will you make him?
Yep, good. If you don't have a person that's in that flow, how do you make them? Well, the challenge is, from the behaviour profile, we can actually see where a person can be developed. So sometimes if you're grabbing someone which is absolutely opposite to their flow, you're not going to have such a good result, even if you train them up. So the question would be then, if we've got that scenario, is there anyone better to help them, support them, guide them, or share the task with them? Or do we just actually say, no, we've got to find someone else in another way? Because they are going to flow in some areas and not in others. Naturally, we flow in some stuff and not in others. So try and put them over then, find out what their flow is and try and move them over to the area that their flow is in. Because if you're in your total ebb, you're not going to enjoy it, you're not going to like it, you're going to find it difficult, you're not going to have fun, and if you're in that scenario, guess what happens to the rest of the team? You become a pain in their side. And that has a roll-on effect of the whole team, doesn't it? But if we came along and said, you don't really like it, what about if I help you with a bit of that and we're working as a team, then you get the team synergy. And then if you're feeling supported, you often will do it for a short amount of time. Yep. But it's all about trying to get people to say, where do they best flow? And sometimes I find that they're doing something outside that has a total fit to the project, but they don't see it. They don't know how to get that skill and utilise it, like the speaking one. And I go, do you realise we could use that? We could get you in the communications. Then they go, oh, okay. And as soon as you start adding value, you become a far more valuable employee as a consequence.